Perfect. All right. So again, welcome everyone. And I'm just going to continually be darting my eyes off here as I continue to admit folks. So here we go. So McMaster University, even though we are currently doing everything virtually, hopefully for not too much longer, we do recognize and acknowledge that McMaster University is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. So I just want to provide a quick overview of the scholarships. The Vanier is a tri-agency program that is designed to attract and retain world-class doctoral students to a Canadian university. The value of the award is $50,000 per year for up to 3 years. And again, it's depending on 3 years, up to 3 years, depending on how many months of doctoral studies have been completed. And you can have a start date of May 2022, September 22, or January 2023. McMaster's internal deadline for this year's competition is Tuesday, September 7th. Just a little bit of information here so you can kind of see how we have fared in the Vanier competitions over the last few years. So our quotas for this year are 10 for CIHR, 7 for NSERC, and 4 applicants for SSHRC. That's the number of applications that we can submit to the federal competition. And something that's new this year is if we have any indigenous applicants, we may recommend the applications from these self-identified students to the Vanier competition above and beyond our institutional quota. And I won't bother going over them, but you can see these and they'll be available later. It just kind of shows you our results over the last 5 years as to what our quota is, what we've received, and yeah, our quota and what's been received.
Sorry, Diane, there we go, sorry.
No worries. Applicants do not have to be registered or admitted to a graduate program at the time of their application. It's a 2-stage internal process here at McMaster. And students must have received departmental endorsement to submit a stage 1 Vanier letter of intent package here at McMaster. If a student is endorsed to move on to the 2nd stage of the internal competition, they will have to submit the full application that is produced through ResearchNet.
Hi, I'm Tony. I'll be speaking about the next few slides. So the first thing is eligibility. Canadian citizens, permanent residents of Canada, and international students can apply. The Vanier competition is one of the few that international students are eligible for from the standpoint of a federal competition. First class average in each of the last 2 years of full-time studies. So that means we'll look at 2019-20 and 2020-21. First class average is considered a 10, which is an A-, and that is again in each of the last 2 years, not combined. Sorry. You cannot have previously held or currently hold a tri-agency doctoral award. So if someone's currently holding an NSERC, SSHRC, or CIHR doctoral, you're not eligible to apply for the Vanier. And you can only be nominated by one Canadian university, which has to have a Vanier allocation, which McMaster does. So if you apply through us, it's no problem. Sorry, my keyboard seems to be acting up. So. Intend to pursue in the summer semester, which is May 2022, or the academic year following the announcement of the results, which is September 2022 or January 2023, full-time doctoral studies and research at the nominating university. If you don't complete your master's by January 2023, you will not be eligible to hold the award. You'll have to be in your doctoral to hold the award. Have completed no more than 20 months of doctoral studies as of May 1st, 2022. Basically, if you've been in school the whole time, you can't have started your doctoral before September 2020. Have completed no more than 32 months of full-time study if you were a direct entry, or again, 32 months if you transferred from your master's to your doctoral. Research respectfully involving and engaging indigenous communities is defined as a research in any field or discipline that is conducted by, grounded in, or engages with First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and/or urban indigenous communities, societies, and/or individuals, and their wisdom, cultures, experiences, and/or knowledge systems as expressed in their dynamic forms, past and present. If your proposed research respectfully involved indigenous communities, please include this research respectfully involves and engages indigenous communities at the beginning of your lay abstract. For nominations in which the proposed research respectfully involves and engages indigenous communities, applicants and nominating institutions should be aware of and refer to relevant principles and protocols established for this type of research. So there's more details on the Vanier website if you needed more information about this. Equity, diversity, and inclusion. The Vanier
Sorry, Tony, can I interrupt for just a moment?
Sure, yep.
We've just had a couple of, just because we're just finishing eligibility, a couple of questions just came up that if students started in September 2019 as a master's and transferred to PhD, are they still eligible?
So yes, so I'll go back to that slide here. So if they started a master's in 2019 and transferred, they can't have more than 32 months of doctoral studies as of May 1st, 2022. So I'm not sure they would be eligible. So 2019, 12, I have to calculate that in my head.
Have to do the math.
Yeah. So if you're looking at 19, 20, 24, and from September to May. I believe, how many months do you get, Diane?
Sorry, I was answering another question. I wasn't checking.
I get,
I can do the math and pop it in there.
9 months. Yeah, I will do that. I'm not sure they can't. I think that's over 32 months.
Yeah, I think it is, but I'll just double check.
Yeah.
All right, sorry. I'll just let you carry on. Thanks.
No problem.
Sorry, can I just jump in and ask a quick question?
Sure.
So if we are currently a PhD part-time student, but if we register for the following year as a full-time, would we still be eligible?
Well, how many years of part-time studies have you done?
It would be 1 full year.
Absolutely, yes. So you started, when did you start your doctoral?
September 2020.
Yes, yeah, that's no problem. Usually they consider a part-time year as like a half year when it comes to full-time studies. So yes, you'd be eligible as long as you're doing full-time studies.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Sorry, can I just ask a question as well?
Absolutely.
So going back to that student who started as an MSc student in 2019, I'm one of those as well, except I only transferred to my PhD last September. So technically I don't even have 12 months in my doctoral program completed yet. Am I still eligible then?
Sorry, I have to go back to that because now.
You know what, Tony, I think there might be a lot of questions like this. If you folks want clarification on those specific things, maybe I could suggest that you send an email to graduatesscholarships@mcmaster.ca. And if you've got those specific things, give us your actual scenario and we'll do our best to get you an answer so that it'll be more clear from you, but we can carry on with the presentation. If everybody's good with that, maybe that's what we'll do.
Yeah, I'll just quickly answer since a few people have asked. If you can't have more than 32 months of doctoral studies as of May 1st. If you were in a master's program in September of 2019, then that's irrelevant. It's only what doctoral studies you've done. So I just needed to clarify that because I was calculating back to master's. So if I doubt that you have more than 32 months of doctoral studies, that means you would have had to start your doctoral in September around 2019. So if you transferred anytime after 2019, then you should be good to go. But if you have specific questions about when you transferred, we can please send us an email at graduatesscholarships@mcmaster.ca or in the chat even, and we can respond to you.
May I ask a question about eligibility?
Sure.
Yeah, I am starting my PhD in religious studies at McMaster from September 21. So I have one OGS for the first year of doctoral program.
Okay.
So am I eligible to apply for Vanier? Because I will be getting it if approved from the September of 22.
Yes, absolutely. So you can't hold an OGS and a Vanier at the same time, but your OGS is from 2021, right? September 2021, correct? Till
Yeah.
August 2022. So then you would, if you got a Vanier, you could start it in September 2022. If you decided to start your Vanier early in May 2022, you would forfeit the last term of your OGS and
Okay.
just start it early. So some people do that as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, does the same apply to a CGSM?
Pardon me?
Does the same apply to CGSM?
Yes, so if you're
Okay.
holding the CGSM in 2021-22, it's irrelevant for this Vanier competition because you would start holding it in 2022-23. You can't hold them at the same time. So were you concerned about a start date for the Vanier?
Not really. I think I have the CGSM, but it's just a bit confusing since I just transferred to my PhD without completing a full master's degree. But I guess I can email with more detail just to double check because I don't want to go through it all here.
Okay. You just can't hold them at the same time. As long as you're doing doctoral studies and you've ended your other award, then it's no problem.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so equity, diversity, and inclusion. The Vanier Canada Graduate Scholarship Program strives to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout the application, review, and selection processes. To better equip all these participating people, including applicants, nominating institutions, referees, reviewers, tri-agencies have created a bunch of references for each group. So if you go on their website, there'll be information for applicants, for your referees, for us as staff, and just to refer to EDI. So this is a great resource for you to look at and for you to refer to your referees. The EDI page addresses the following topics: promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion in research, research respectfully involving and engaging Indigenous communities, and limiting unconscious bias. Nancy and Brenda?
Hi there, I'm Nancy Carter. I'm faculty in the School of Nursing and I'm the Assistant Dean of the Nursing Graduate Program. I'm also a member of the internal Vanier Scholarship Committee, and I think I'm going to get my 5-year pin soon. I think I've been doing it for the last 4 years, and I'm delighted to be here and present with my colleague Brenda.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Carter. And we use our first names, right, Nancy? So yeah, I'm Dr. Brenda Berkelian, Brenda, and I'm a professor in the School of Rehabilitation Science. And I had the pleasure of co-chairing the Vanier committee at the national level for CIHR this year. So I'm really happy to give you a little bit of behind the scenes. What I can tell you at that level is that I don't see McMaster scholarships. So people are excused when a McMaster candidate comes forward. So I don't see the final McMaster candidates. But what I will say is that I see every other schools, and I see us argue, which was by Microsoft Teams, about candidates and what makes a strong application. So today, Nancy and I are going to share the Zoom stage with 2 award winners from McMaster. Unfortunately, Ahmed Badr can't join us today, but he's going to, well, I should say he's going to try. Something came up. So Sophie, if you want to introduce yourself as a CIHR Vanier Scholar for 2021.
So hi everyone, my name is Sophie Gana. I'm a 3rd-year MD PhD student at McMaster, and I'm doing my PhD in the Department of Biochemistry. And as was mentioned, I won the CIHR Vanier Scholarship for 2021.
Great. And Elise?
Hi everyone, my name is Elise Desjardins and I am still in my first year PhD in the School of Earth, Environment and Society, and my research is focused on urban planning and mobility and independent travel for children.
Wonderful. Yeah. So what's going to happen is we're going to go through our slides with Nancy. Keep asking those questions. So Tony and Diane and their colleagues know lots, right? About, and there comes the poll to find out a little bit about you. But again, I think we really need to use our resources. And so, yeah, to find out whether you're eligible is number one, right? Because you don't want to waste time applying for something if you're not eligible. Number two is you want to make sure you're a strong candidate. And in fact, I would tie that with number one still, because you need to decide where you put your time in. And Nancy and I are going to talk about that as well, right, Nancy? So I think we can go on to the next slide. What we're going to do is we're going to call on Sophie and Elise. So we're going to present our part. Nancy and I go back and forth, and then we call on Sophie or Elise to maybe add to what we're saying. So we know with the Vanier, it's a really unique scholarship in Canada. In fact, it's the most prestigious scholarship that somebody can be awarded in Canada at the graduate level. You'll hear the word exceptional used over and over again. We don't just say excellence, and excellence is very good, and that's fantastic. But exceptional is the word we use, and it's really in these three areas, right? It's academic excellence, so there's the word excellence, but we will say academic exceptional, research potential, which is also exceptional, and exceptional leadership. And we're going to walk you through those criteria in terms of what we're looking at. So with academic excellence, I mean, this is almost, I'm going to tell you that everybody whose dossiers I've seen at that level, at the highest level, but also, I mean, one thing you have to remember is there's different levels of where your dossier is reviewed. So you have to be put forward by McMaster, right? So you have to be put forward by your department, actually, right? So everything has to sort of hit the right spots, the sweet Vanier spot all the way through. And I see it at its final resting point, so to speak. So when academic excellence, I'm going to tell you that everybody I see at the national level is like outstanding. And in fact, we do look back at all your grades because you are required. And even if you're, and I'm going to say, even if you're an international student, to have your transcripts, right? Because we look back, and with those transcripts comes an interpretation as well, right, on terms of grade. So we can look and calculate should we choose as people, as reviewers of scholarships, to see, you know, what is the calculation, and you know what, if there was a B or a C or those kinds of things, that's something we have to, that comes into play. I'm going to add something to the academic excellence, is that this year we talked about EDI. We talked about equity, diversity, and inclusion when it came to academic excellence, because we know, and I say we have learned a lot this year about systemic bias in our system. And that means in our academic systems, that means systems across the board in terms of how people are awarded grades, about the barriers that are in place. So, so as much as we are looking at grades, there was also discussion about candidates who we knew EDI came at play. So that's gender, right? That's ethnicity, and that's other areas that we had to take into account. And that was because they had told that as part of their story. That's why, right? That we could have that conversation. So they had raised it in some of their statements, and then that required us to have a conversation, because as reviewers, we've all had unconscious bias training, and we have to have those conversations. So all of that to say academic excellence is important. And I know we're going to go through these more, right? So research potential, Tony's cueing me along here. Research potential is important too. So at one point, you know, you think, oh, I'll put in my project, it's not that fully formed. Well, I can tell you that there's experts around the table. I'm an expert in rehabilitation and other things, but there's always somebody around the table who usually has some expertise in the field, because the review committee is mixed, right, in terms of background. So they're able to comment on the research proposal in terms of its excellence, because we can see we were assigned candidates, but we can see everybody's applications that's being discussed. So all of that to say that, yes, you could have transferred from a master's to a PhD, and that's fine, but I'll say the expectation is a record of that you have publications in press, not in progress, they're in press, or they're published, conference papers and abstracts. Again, is there an EDI lens to this? Yes, there is, but the notion of exceptional is discussed. Next slide. I feel like I'm yelling. I hope
No, you're okay.
I can calm down a little bit. I want McMaster to do really well. You can see that we're moving up a little bit, right? So let's keep the momentum going here. So with research potential, again, we're on to leadership. So leadership is an interesting one, and Nancy is going to have some really great tips, some great a little bit more tips at the end, right, Nancy, in terms of walking through leadership. But very briefly, it is a variety of things. It is not leadership inside your program, inside your lab. I'm really sorry to say that, and I'm apologizing, and maybe that's the Canadian in me, but it's not leadership as a TA, because that's an expectation. It's not leadership as, and I'm saying the things that it's not, because that's sometimes easier than to say what it is. It is about, again, sometimes people do all kinds of interesting things, but they could be a leader in, like, we had somebody who played the bagpipes, okay, and did all kinds of interesting things with, like, with his group in terms of leadership, playing at different events as a volunteer. And I'm giving that example. There's been people who have exceptional athletes and have gone on to, the Olympics, for example, but people also, coaching, doing different things at a very high level. So that's very much outside academic work. So I will say the Vanier is this notion of a well-rounded, it's a bit like a Rhodes Scholar of Canada. That's what they equated it with, right? This well-rounded, exceptional applicant who has a story that is important, and then has referees that back up that story, which we're going to talk about as well. So again, there's some examples here, but we'll get into them. Next slide. I think this is really important. Look how we have it bolded in a box, that we say this is the one that sort of separates people. If it's close and you're on the cusp of a Vanier, this is the one that's going to push you into the Vanier cup, and this is the one that's going to push you out of that cup. It's going to filter you. So I see Sophie kind of smiling there, and I think I'm getting close to my last part, because Nancy's going to talk about some examples of leadership. But Sophie, I wondered, and Elise, and I'll start with Sophie, whether you had some thoughts about what I just shared.
Just generally, I think it's a little overwhelming with, like, the continued messaging of exceptional and excellent. And this is not me just trying to be humble for the sake of being humble, but, like, for example, even under, like, the research potential, I didn't have any first author publications, but I did have poster sessions, and I did have other avenues where I was able to show that I did have research, but it's not necessarily all about publications. And I just wanted to make that fact known.
Yeah. No, you're right, but that will tell me, because it's about research potential, right? So that tells me a story as somebody, because your application, Sophie's not there telling me anymore, right? Her application has to read for itself, and so I make that story helps, right, in the way it's framed, in the way her referee letters. Also, Sophie, just so you know, would have spoken to your abilities to say those are signals to us, right, that you're on a really positive trajectory, and that's what this is about too, research potential. Elise, I don't know if you have anything to add.
So I didn't have any publications either in terms of being first author, but I had submitted papers that I had written during my master's. So I applied just as I was starting the PhD program. So I think if you're working on something, it's really important to include those things as well, because by the time you find out about the Vanier, you'll likely have papers published. So whatever you're working on is really important to include, and to think of all the things you're working on, because it took me several days to actually think about all the small things that I didn't maybe even consider worthy of including, but there were lots of small things that really as a whole built up towards what I had been working on for several years. So and that applies both to research and leadership. So I can talk more about that later after Nancy talks about leadership.
Yeah, thanks, Elise. I think that's some really good points there, because it does take some reflection. You're like, oh yeah. So you almost have this list, right, that you're making, because you remember some things that that could fall into that category. work. Yeah, so it takes time to put this story together.
Yeah, and I would say too, like something that might not seem meaningful, like a random conference that you did as a student, is actually really meaningful. Like you're learning and you're developing your portfolio. So anything that you think that you should be really proud of or that you learned something is really important to include in your application.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, we are going to turn the floor over to Nancy, and we'll circle back to Sophie and Elise as well.
Okay, so a lot of students, I think the leadership statement is difficult for students, the most difficult part. And students often wonder, what are some examples of things I have done? And just here's a list of different things people have done that you may want to consider using if you're thinking, oh, I'm not doing enough. So some of you may have organizations or groups based on the program you're in that you've been a leader in. If there's a scientific meeting that you've done some tasks in or have led a certain committee at a scientific committee, university committees. Again, it's often broader than just your lab or your research group, and going broader with either within your school, your program, or larger. You may have written some position papers or clinical practice guidelines if you're a health professional, being invited to talks, different exercises, etc. Okay, or contributing to newsletters. Okay, so those are examples of things you could put as leadership contributions. Next slide. And then some other things you may have done related to review activities, any teaching you've done. But again, this is above and beyond. So a typical TA position that almost most PhD students or graduate students would have is not necessarily an example of leadership, but perhaps you have helped in the development of a program within your group or for the school. You've developed some courses or some supervisor activity. Those are examples you may want to use of leadership.
But again, not supervising somebody in your lab. That's still
Right.
not, right? That's sort of an expectation, right? That's my understanding. And sort of the biomedical labs, which Sophie can speak to, right? That would be expected that you would oversee maybe an undergraduate student. And to be honest, like you almost virtually just sort of glaze over if somebody writes that. I'm looking for those things that make people stand out.
Exactly. Okay. Next slide. So I think, Brenda, you're going to chat a bit about this.
What we're going to do now, right, is go through each of these with some more tips. So that was like a really brief overview, and then we really want to think through how do we frame things. So we're going on to the next slide. Yeah, so one thing that I did have on the last slide, sorry, Tony, I just said that, is that the way things are written, again, when we have things in a box, the way things are written, I had said that there's usually an expert around the table in your area, or a person with expertise in your area, but nonetheless, your applications are read by people who have no familiarity with your field. So that becomes really important. I think somebody said, oh, can somebody read over, is there people available to read my application over? That's part of the process too, right? Is to have people read over things that who are outside your field. They would still be considered, right? Like having your mom read things over is not always the most helpful. You need people that are quite accomplished, right? In terms of, that would be able to critique and help provide that kind of feedback at that level.
I think that's I was just going to say, Brenna, that's so important. So I sit at the university committee level, and I have to read the applications from biomedical science. I have to read the applications from engineering, from all the programs. And I have to, I'm a health services researcher. I have to be able to understand them and know what the research proposal is about. And if it's too grounded in disciplinary language or too grounded in research methodology language that not everyone understands, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Okay, next slide. So for the research proposal, so again, we said like we want to avoid the jargon. So there are ways to explain biochemistry, right, Sophie, without making people feel like, whoa, what's going on here? But also make people feel like, wow, Sophie knows what she's talking about. So yeah, it's like walking that fine line with explaining things. And again, you're probably not surprised to see this because many of you have made it to graduate level, is the notion of when do we use graphs and images to explain things, right? The notion of clarity, short sentences are better, right? And if we feel like we have to put and, we put a period and we start a new sentence. We want to formulate around a well understood hypothesis. And we want to use the full 2 pages, but we need white space in there too, everybody, because our brains don't do well when we do well in chunks, but we don't do well when it's like one giant chunk. So it is what we'll call grants. I want to avoid the word grantsmanship, and those. And I know that the School of Graduate Studies has tips on how to do that, let alone lots of tips out there about how to write in a way that's compelling, understandable, knowledgeable, and clear. And exciting. You want the reviewer to be, when they're reading it, they're nodding, right? You want to imagine somebody nodding and saying, this person's on a good trajectory. This is really important. This is like, wow, like there's a lot of people that are having a hard time, or this area is something that's very compelling and timely. And it's a good thing that Sophie or Elise, if I'm reading Elise's application, a good thing Elise is studying this. It's really important. So I think we can go to the next slide.
Okay, your personal leadership statement. Again, a lot of students struggle with this, but you will have some support if you get to a certain level at McMaster. So this is really a clear statement. It's 2 pages that you're, addressing to the committee about the challenges and opportunities that have shaped your research. I think, yes. So read the Vanier website carefully and follow the instructions. Use your full 2 pages, but again, you need to have white space and good paragraphing. Use action words and make sure that what you write in your leadership statement can be found in your CCV, right? So they have to marry well. Be concise and avoid an autobiographical approach. And what I mean by that, and Brenda does a great job of saying, this is your story. We want to learn about you. But what isn't a great approach is to start off with, ever since I've been in grade school, I have done this, this, and this. And then I knew I wanted to be a scientist. And in high school, I took biology. That's not the best way to be. That autobiographical approach is not the best way to write your leadership statement. So I'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, so it should really highlight the activities as they relate to you being a researcher in your field, okay, or being a leader in your field of research. So for instance, if I can think of a past Vanier winner, a lot of the this is a person whose research was in geriatrics and mental health, and a lot of the volunteer work she did was related to geriatrics. She led and developed a program with older people in the community. That's what she started off with, because that really linked well with the research she wanted to do, as opposed to that kind of biographical where she started in high school and all the different things she did. Be deliberate when you describe the activities you participate in and how they support your future leadership in your area of research. So again, link those activities you're doing to your goals in your research program. How does it relate to what you want to do and to be a leader in your research field? Okay. Again, clear writing and formatting. Describe what you're doing and have done above and beyond your research and your coursework. So it's above and beyond working in the lab. It's above and beyond, you took these courses. What extra things have you done? What other ways have you participated? Next slide. Okay. Your objective is to show how you've started on your way to becoming a future leader and you have that potential. Okay. Make it a compelling story that links your research accomplishments and your future goals and trajectory. Okay, and one way to start for you to start is to just start with a laundry list. Just what have you done? What kind of leadership activities have you done? And then maybe pick, out of that list, pick the top 3 that are related to your research, perhaps related to you being a future academic researcher, and consider how write about how that's impactful and what you've done. Okay.
I will say sometimes, Nancy, the leadership actually sits outside the research, right?
Yes.
And it again sort of expands, right? A little bit something to keep in mind.
Yep. But for instance, but I think it's important to link it. So for instance, let's say, there's a program I know that a lot of students get involved in where it's helping get science into, I can't remember what it's called, going to schools and getting kids jazzed up about science. Now that may not be directly related to your specific research, but it's, you can talk about how it's a form of communication, working with the community, it's a knowledge translation activity. Okay, so you can kind of figure out how to link it. Okay, next slide. Your leadership statement should be as compelling as your proposal. Again, this is a competition where it's 30, a third leadership, a third research, a third academics. Don't be modest. You have to sell yourself. You need to be exceptional. And describe the significance in terms of leadership and a sphere of influence, the impact and the importance of what you're doing in terms of your career objectives. Okay, so maybe I'll ask, I don't know if Sophie and Elise want to add in a bit about their leadership statement or some of the activities they listed. You want to share if you can remember that?
I can go first. So I think that when I was starting to write my leadership statement, I kind of did do that activity of like listing down all of the things that I've done in the past, like couple of years in my undergrad and during my time in med school. And then from there, I just picked activities. And I think that I usually gravitated to a certain domain. A lot of the things that I did outside of school were social justice linked. And I study like Parkinson's disease and the impact of the microbiome in Parkinson's disease development in C. elegans. So I felt initially that those two things were like two different parts of me. Like I didn't know how to link the social justice work that I did with like the wet lab work that I was doing. But I also just tried to like think of like ways, because I think that how all of it contributes to me as an individual. And I just tried to like create a statement where I highlighted like the things, the values that I had and how I contributed to my community my school community, my larger community, and how I was hoping to like have an impact generally in like the clinical world as well as the research world, and how like having that social justice lens actually makes me a better scientist. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that all of your activities line up beautifully with everything that you're writing, but just being able to like give a statement that has a well-rounded picture of who you are and how all the things that you've done contribute to making you a better leader and scientist.
That's great, Sophie, thank you. Elise, do you want anything you want to add?
Yeah, so I also did sort of a list of the things that I was involved with. And then I went back and I looked at my email calendar to see, over the past few years, if there was anything that I had missed in terms of conferences, presentations. I reached out to my supervisor and some other colleagues to say, what are the main things that, am I missing anything here in terms of things that I'd been involved with, just to kind of check for any blind spots. And what I found that I was missing a lot were the things that I had been invited to do. So it was easy for me to think about the things that I had gone and done on my own, but then I often was forgetting about that I had been invited to participate in this committee, or invited to speak in this class, or invited to do something. So the things that you're invited to do are really a reflection of people recognizing potential in you. They want you to be part of something. So checking in with your supervisor or your lab colleagues or other people to say, am I missing anything here that has contributed to my development as a leader or as a researcher? I really struggled with the modesty piece. My supervisor was the primary person who reviewed my leadership statement, and I didn't really have very strong words for what I had done initially. And then a lot of the feedback was, don't be modest, don't be humble, like you did something really great, or you were the only one in your program at the master's level who did this. So don't be afraid of saying those things. And it didn't come naturally to me to say, I was the only one who did this, or I was the only one who did that. And so your supervisor hopefully will help you bring that to the surface, because those are the types of things that the committee is looking for. You know, they don't know you personally. They want to know what sets you apart, what makes you exceptional. And I would say most of my leadership activities really did relate to my research. So I didn't really have different spheres of things that I have been involved in. But my educational experience was really interesting in that I started my master's at a different university. Then I was reflecting on what I wanted. Then I came back to Mac. So I really tried to think about what are all of the decisions that I've made that have led me to this point? Like, why am I applying to this scholarship? And why is this research something that I feel I have to do, that is both, you know, in terms of the relevance of the research, but also me as a researcher, as someone leading this. So that took a lot of time. I went through, I think, 4 or 5 iterations of my leadership statement and cutting things and adding things. In terms of it aligning with your CV, I tried to focus on things that I was really proud of and not feel like I had to fit everything into the leadership statement, because my CV would discuss all of the other things that maybe didn't need that, you know, really didn't need that space in the leadership statement. So getting feedback from your supervisor will really help about that. And then finally, I tried to leave some spot at the end, a short paragraph of just like, where am I going next? Like, why is this going to help me along the path of where I want to go? And where do I see myself moving forward? How am I going to continue making contributions based on what I'm able to accomplish through the Vanier Scholarship? So those are just like some brief thoughts. But don't be modest, even though it might be your first instinct. You'll have to go through this multiple times. Take all feedback, you know, even if it's critical. I think one of the reviewers in my initial application said I was interesting but not compelling. And I thought, okay. So then how can I go back and be more compelling? Like, if I'm an interesting person, what would set me apart to be more compelling? So I worked on that after, you know, the feedback from stage 1. So don't take anything personal. They're all trying to help you get into, you know, the final category. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that for now.
Thank you both. And I think, you know, Brenda started by talking about, you know, this is one of the most prestigious graduate scholarships. There's work involved in this. It is prestigious, and you can hear both the work that Sophie and Elise did for this. Next slide, please. So again, you may have a long list of things you've done. Put the strongest and proof about those, you know, kind of up front. There is reviewer fatigue. And, you know, you want to make sure that you're engaging the reviewers early on about the important things you've done, and provide a proof of change. And if I can use an example, don't just talk about, if you've created a program in your, let's say you've created a mentorship program in your school among students. Don't just say I created a mentorship program. Maybe talked about, you know, there was no mentorship program for students prior to this. And this is what I did to create this mentorship program, and I've done these certain things. And since I've created this mentorship program, I have received feedback. And now this year I'm going to be training the mentees, because this, et cetera, et cetera. So some, you know, describe it. How have you made changes? What was there before? And why was it important that you did this? And never expect the reviewer to understand why this was an important accomplishment. Stress the value of the work you've done. Give insights and let them know what kind of contribution it was, and how you've gone above and beyond expected than normal expectations to overcome any obstacles, foster others, and spearhead change. And next slide. Be upfront, honest, authentic. You can use numbers to back up your claims if there are, you know, increases in membership, readership, funding, etc. Use those strong action words. Don't overuse lead and led. Try to think of other words instead. State what the end impact was, if there was an impact. And just avoiding unrelated fluff. You're better to concentrate on your, you know, your solid leadership activity than to adding too much that wasn't just volunteer work or wasn't that impactful. And if you don't really have evidence of what you've done, it can be off-putting to the reviewers. So, you know, strong statements to what you've done.
No,
Okay.
I know there's some questions happening.
Other questions? Okay.
There's some things happening a little bit in the chat, but I know Diane and Tony are looking at those, and we will address some of those questions at the end. But I will say, like, for your research statement, right? There's just a question there about it. You know, I do research with indigenous communities in Guatemala. Does that count? Well, that counts, right? Because that's your research project, right? And
Right.
so then it's about how do you put that together, right? In your two, I forget what the space allocation is, but how do you present that research in a scholarly way, the potential for it to make a difference, and to also demonstrate, right? What are the next steps in your research? Now, Sophie and Elise, I don't know if you have any comment on how you framed your research potential projects, but Sophia, I highly suspect that in the CIHR realm, it really was about, you know, this is my thesis project and this is what it's going to focus on. But please, I don't know if you want to add anything to the research part.
I think just the first thing when I was putting together my research proposal is I wanted to like avoid being really jargony, because of, I think sometimes there's a tendency to like very much fall into using all of like the buzzwords from your field as opposed to like speaking generally. So the way that I just broke down my leadership, like the research proposal, is I just had the background. So I just introduced like the context of the research I was doing. I laid out objectives. I gave a very brief summary of like all of the experimental approaches I was doing for each objective. And then I think that I put a lot of work into explaining the significance. So like, yes, I'm doing like this work, but like, this is how I see it like impacting like the field. This is how I see it impacting patient care, et cetera, because as an MD PhD applicant, I really did want to emphasize that I'm also thinking clinically, and this is not, and just kind of trying to bring all of my application together.
Yeah.
And then the last section was just talking about the research environment and things that will help me be successful in this work.
Yeah, so it is really that research proposal is almost, I want to say, like a really short synopsis of what you're going to be doing for your thesis work, right? Or what your focus is for the next 4 years, or however much you have left in terms of your PhD work. So Elise, I know it's a little bit different in the SSHRC, but nonetheless still, right, the significance is probably what Sophie says resonated as well. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, mine started with just like a brief overview basically of the issue, like what was the context of why this research was needed, the research questions, the hypothesis, the methods that were going to be used, the significance. So my research involves community partners here in Hamilton. So I spoke a lot about how community-based research was really important around the issue of children's mobility. There's public health working on this.
Uh-oh. I think she just froze. The old Zoom freeze. Elise, we just lost you for a second there.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
You just froze a bit.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep, you're back. So we just said that you were, where was she? She was at, like, my research focuses on mobility of children in Hamilton.
Yeah, so it involves a lot of different groups across the city. So I wanted to emphasize the significance was that the project would be bringing together people who are already working on this issue, but on something that was new and novel, because the city is going to be building these bicycle boulevards, and there's no, before and after, study of how this would affect a particular population. So I spoke a lot about that. And then I also gave a significant amount of space as well to the support I would get from my committee members and my supervisor. So my supervisor is part of a broader group across Canada that works on children's mobility. So I thought, well, if I'm in this research group, I'm a really ideal candidate for the scholarship to do this sort of work, because I'm going to get all this support from different people. But I covered all of the specific sections that Vanier asks you to cover for SSHRC. So you want to make sure you have balance between that.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, there's a question. Most of my process leaderships are roles in my own language. So I think you can write about in Turkey. I think what you did this in Turkey, I'm assuming, I have done this, describe it. You don't need proofs in your leadership statement that you've done it. And perhaps though, if leadership activities you've done have been in another institution or outside of McMaster in the community, that one of those people may want to be your leadership referees.
Yeah, so I will say, like, this notion of we have people from around the world apply for Vaniers. This is the Vanier Scholarship is open. It's one of the few scholarships that's open, right, to international students. So, I've read many statements with many examples of people doing things in China, Australia, Singapore. I don't need to go through all the countries, but just it's more again what they were doing, not where they were doing it. And the letters then, to Nancy's point, which we'll talk about at the end, the referees should match, right, what you're outlining in your leadership statement. And so that, I'm not saying that's the proof, but in some ways that helps validate what you're sharing. Can I say that I've ever gone to check or Googled people that said I have Google, right? Yeah. Somebody said that they had done something and then I could actually go and walk, right? Like I went and looked at, those kind of things. So it's not to say that a reviewer can't go and find out, right? If you're naming or framing something. So you always want, back to this notion of upfront, honest and authentic, and that bullet is key, right? So you're not making up things. Obviously, this is coming from an authentic place. And you're presenting your most authentic self, which means this is what I've done. But to Lisa's and Sophie's point, somebody's read that over and helped to make it, and I'm going to say, compelling. So how the words you choose, how it's framed, where it's situated in your statement, right up front, Nancy says, right? I've got an important point to make. Somebody reads it and goes, boy, this was hidden down here, move this up. And you're like, wow, that reads way better, or not, right? So this is, again, a time thing. You need people to review, and you need people to give you those kind of tips. Nancy, I think we're on to the next.
Yep, next slide.
Yeah, so we're moving on to the CCV, which is everybody's favorite acronym in graduate work and in academia in Canada. So we are filling in that CCV, and that can take more time than we think, and it can be fussy, right? Sophie and Elise, it's fussy and it's hard. When you're a graduate student, you want to fill, and it's the same with a resume, you want to fill everything in. And again, it's a time thing, but I think you do start with paper or Microsoft Word, and then you're thinking, right, translating that into CCV. But I know that Tony and Diane, sometimes we don't know where to put things. And sometimes the people at the School of Graduate Studies can help. So can your supervisor, and so can the people that you work with, right, on where something should go in the CCV. So we want to make sure that our leadership examples are in there, our research potential, and our academic excellence. So things are listed there. And it's usually the last 5 years. Right? We don't, but that can depend. If we're an experienced, I'm not calling it mature, but if we're a very experienced student, things can go back quite a ways, right? But it should really be building towards the Vanier, not away from it, right? So that means that the accomplishments really are picking up speed, so to speak, when I'm looking at a CCV. I look at a CCV, I think it's such an easy way to scan. Many of our colleagues in CIHR will count, and then they're presenting their candidates. They will say, this person had 3 presentations, 2 conference abstracts, 4 international, right? Like that's the way sometimes the candidate is shared, and that's an easy way, right, to count. We on the CIHR submitted doesn't count. To have things in progress. So Elise said that, but we do not, that's there. And the instructions are now to people applying for CIHR, don't put in progress on there. It should be either in press, so that means it's on its way, or published. And that's the same for like conference abstract. If there is a conference that's been accepted, that should be there, but submitted is not going to count. I can't comment on NSERC specifically, but I know for CIHR that's not the case. And Ahmed may be able to, but Ahmed's not on the committee, so it's better for Diane and Tony to check on that, Kay, in case that's something. So if you have impact factor of journals, more information the better, right? But some fields, depending on, like in occupational therapy, our journals don't have high impact factors, right? But we have have, like the Canadian Journal of OT is better than, you know, physical and occupational therapy and geriatrics. So there's better journals for sure. And that's something that, that people will look at. I know that Sophie and Elise both didn't have first authored publications. I think that's a great point, but you are up against people who have had multiple first author publications, which sounds unbelievable in some ways, but that's their story, right? And how they've positioned themselves, but they could be weak in other areas. Right? You don't know that. Maybe their leadership isn't the best because they spend all their time writing articles. But the point is where do you invest to make yourself a strong Vanier candidate? And if you feel like there's holes in your CV, then you're better, CCV, you're better to go spend time doing that and filling that hole than to be applying for a Vanier, because you don't get feedback on the Vanier. You will get feedback though when you apply and submit a manuscript, right? So that's the interesting part. Sophie and Elise, I don't know if you have any comments on this part, the journal pubs part. I think next slide has a little bit more about journals. Yeah, so I think we have a range of some of the expectations of journal articles, but this notion of you know, being a first author is talked about and looked at, because usually people who've done a master's, I'm going to say, do they end up in a better spot during our Vanier discussions at the national level? Well, usually they've published their master's thesis, right? And that's put them in a different position, but people have different stories, and you can see the shirk there. So now I'm ready to turn it over. Elise, maybe you can comment first on the.
Yeah, so I had one publication where I was, I think, the third author, so my contribution was smaller, and so I indicated that as well. But like I said, I had, at the time that I had submitted my application, I had 3 papers that were submitted for publication, and so that was in my program. Most students didn't submit a paper, and they didn't submit 3. So that was something that stood apart for my program, and that was obviously acceptable because I received the scholarship. But in terms of conference presentations, I think I had 3. I didn't have any any book chapters, but I had written or contributed to other policy papers, which is also common in my field of transportation geography as well. So I had a number of publications that would have been considered gray literature, but that spoke to my contributions as a community engaged researcher. So that, I think, also helped to lend support to my research potential, which would have been a community-based project.
Thanks, Elise. Those are great tips. Sophie.
So when I was applying, I think my circumstance is a little different than other applicants, because at the time that I was writing the application, I had completed 3 years of an undergrad, and then I had not left research, and I did 1 year of medical school, and then that's when I was applying. So I didn't have any masters. I didn't even have like a full undergraduate degree. So I didn't do a 4-year thesis, so I didn't have that opportunity to have that. But I did have like research that I did during my the 3 years of undergrad that I did complete. So I did kind of emphasize a lot, like the awards that I won for those research opportunities. I also highlighted the fact that I didn't complete a master's or an undergraduate degree in my application. So I did emphasize, even in the last line of my leadership statement, I was emphasizing that in the 3 years of my undergrad and the 1 year of medical school, I was able to accomplish all of this. And then I did highlight some of the 4th or 5th author publications that I did get out of my undergrad, because I was able to contribute to some projects that did get published. So I think that if you are in like a similar circumstance to me, then maybe like highlighting that you're early on in your career, and yes, you're up against other people who have completed a master's or who have all of these publications, but I'm not there yet, but I can get there. And I think that that's what you're trying to market.
Yeah,
That's
thanks.
great.
Nancy, I don't know if you have any other thoughts.
No, the only thing, and I think you talked a bit about this, but you know, again, it's academic excellence, it's research, and it's leadership. And something, you know, for people who are applying this year, you've got about 2 months to the application stage. There are some things you can influence and some things you can't between now and application time. You can't change your grades. So if one of these people who, looking at your grades, you may be sitting at the low end of the spectrum. You can't do too much about that, but perhaps you can submit an abstract, you can submit a paper. It doesn't have to be a high-end paper, but you may be able to have some contributions in one of the other two spheres. That's all I want to say. Not everyone's going to be perfect in everything, but it's that combination. And there is an opportunity between now and the deadline to influence certain things, not your grades, but perhaps in the other areas you can make some changes and gain some ground to make yourself more competitive.
Yeah, there may be some late breaker abstracts, right? In your right, late breaker submissions, and those kinds of things. So yeah, I will say the Vanier, they use the term well-rounded, right? So again, this notion of, leader in the community, research potential, and academic excellence. The approaches. Okay, next slide.
Brenda, sorry, can I just pop in for a second? It's Diane. There is a question in the chat, and it's I just thought maybe it might be a point to address it here. Is if there was difficult circumstances that led to not being able to publish master's results, should that be of this part of the story that they tell?
So there is, I think the Vanier does have a spot for you to share circumstances related to challenging circumstances, or just an opportunity to share, if there is something to tell. I'm not sure I would use the leadership statement for that unless that was part of some, part of the story that you're wanting to convey. So there is a spot for you to and we know that life throws things at us, and so yeah, there is an opportunity to share. I don't know if Sophie or Elise have any comments at that point. No, but I'm pretty sure Diane and
I've rarely seen that used.
Yeah,
but when I have, I guess it depends on how extenuating the circumstances were for you not be able to publish results, but I've never seen something like that in that kind of statement.
I will probably say the same thing, Nancy, but I know I don't know what.
It all depends.
It depends, and it might be good to talk to Diane or Tony about that, and then they can obviously ask others to find out more, because I will say too, at the level that I've reviewed, people have experienced challenges, and it is part of the application and part of that's taken into consideration. So I think we're on to referee assessments, and I think we've said that a few times, that this is all still part of your package, and in fact it's a really important part. So you would say, well, everybody's going to have great references, but we know that Dr. Thompson, actually, I think it was attached to our email, is that he's put together, I think he's Associate Dean, School of Graduate Studies, about what can you share with your referees as tips to help them write a strong letter. These letters are really important, and there's good referee letters, and then there's excellent referee letters. And so we know that you do not see these letters. That's not part of this, a part of these circumstances, but you want to help your referee be able to tell your story. And I will turn to Elise and Sophie shortly, who I expect assisted their referees in conveying key parts of their story. So everybody can read these bullets, right? But you're giving sometimes documents to your referees, just as I said, to help nudge them along. This takes time to write a really strong reference letter. And as somebody who's written reference letters, I appreciate time. And sometimes I get them done early. It's not because I need time, because I'm going right down the last minute. In fact, I get them done early. I let them sit and I come back to it. I can also make it more compelling, right? In some circumstances, I have to ask the candidate, but I will say, can I share my letter? Because I know sometimes this is, right, so it has some confidential and personal information, but it can be helpful to have my own colleagues read my referee letters to improve them. So these are things that's a little bit out of your hands, but these are suggestions that you can give, right, to people to help write a strong referee document. And you can see that last bullet is a meaty one, and I'm not going to review that, but the key is the equity, diversity, and inclusion page that they need to have the pertinent information for that. And even on Dr. Thompson's last slide, we have a habit, we have an all-female crew here, but we have a habit when we write, and that's including me as a female writing for female, for candidates who identify as female, writing letters. I will use different words. That's actually an unconscious bias. So to be really aware of the type of sentences that I'm using. And there's a tip sheet from the University of Arizona about how sometimes we write differently for candidates that identify as female. I'm just going to go to the next slide because it's a continued. Again, there's usually your supervisor will be one of your referees. I will say that, and that's usual. Do I, as a reviewer, when I get somebody's package, go, how come the supervisor didn't write this? Well, sometimes I make up my own story because I'm like, oh, they're new, right? They actually don't know this student this is their first year, so the student has relied on their past supervisor. That's not uncommon in their masters, or somebody that really knows their work in their field. So, but usually the supervisor is there. Yeah, and so that's where that last bullet is about that major scholarship support letter guide. Very helpful, and it's an easy slide set to go through. But I think that's something that you want to be sending along with your referee letters. And yeah, and I think I'll turn over to Sophie now, maybe to speak briefly about how she sort of guided her. We're talking about not more academic references because we're going to talk about the leadership reference letters in a second, but talking more on the academic side, Sophie and Elise. So Sophie, I don't know if you have comments.
So for the two people I asked for the academic references, it was my current PhD supervisor and then my supervisor during my undergraduate research. And basically when I was sending with my current PhD supervisor, it was more like an open dialogue. So she was one of the people who reviewed the research proposal. She's seen my CV. So I kind of like highlighted specific points that I'm like, can you please mention this? But with my undergraduate supervisor, because there's like a degree of separation now, I did provide, I went onto the Vanier website and I think there's like criteria in which they assess individuals. So I just made a document where I highlighted like the criteria, specifically looking at like the research potential section of it and also just the leadership section of it. And I'm like, these are the criteria with which they're assessing applicants. And then I also provided my CV highlighting specific activities that I had done with my undergraduate supervisor. I also provided my leadership statement so they could read it, as well as my research proposal. And then I also just gave them like just a general document of just information that I think was pertinent about deadlines and et cetera. And that's kind of how I guided my referees. And I would check in being like, do you need any more information from me? How is it going?
Yes. Sophie, so yeah, the gentle nudges are necessary, and it takes time, right? Like that was a time. Yeah, how's it going? Can I help you? Here's another version. Here's some more bullets. Yeah, Elise?
Yeah, there's nothing sort of different from what I did with Sophie. I'll just say briefly that my referee was my master's supervisor and my PhD supervisor, and I also asked the director of the Master of Public Health program, who was part of my supervisory committee. So my supervisor was in geography, so he knew, my contributions in that area, and then she knew my contributions in public health. So their referee letters overlap, but also sort of spoke to how my strengths in both disciplines kind of were combining with my research proposal. And I asked them, well in advance, and gave them time to ask questions, or, to say, is there anything else that, you forgot to mention that you think I should be included? So, yeah.
Thanks, Elise.
There was a question about if you're somebody asked one of my referees is the assistant dean, but they should be writing the recommendation letter. So then you would have the dean or another person in the leadership write your recommendation letter. Yeah, that happens. Yeah, that's happened in nursing too.
Yeah. So somebody else will help that other person sign that. Yeah, sign that other letter. even though the supervisor may be actually, the person may be writing both, but usually we help each other. I think we're on to the leadership reference letters, Nancy.
Okay, so again, these are two different reference letters that speak to your potential as a future leader and your current leadership. And they ideally should be people who know you in a non-academic capacity, you know, that speaks to your personal trajectory, but they can be people in academia. So you may want to share your personal leadership state with them. It should, you know, what they say everything should come together and jive, right? Your references, your CV, your research proposal, everything should come together. So again, they are going to provide an assessment of your either demonstrated and potential leadership ability. So, and I may ask Sophie and Elise if they want to share who they asked to write their leadership references. Elise, do you remember who? Yeah, who you chose?
I asked one of the community partners who was going to be working with me on my research project. So this was someone who had known me for over 3 years, someone who had awarded me a leadership award, like for the community, so they could speak to that aspect. And I also asked them to speak to the importance and relevance of the proposed research. So I think that that really tied everything together for them to say, you know, we think that this is really useful. We don't normally get to research the infrastructure that we're building in Hamilton. So this is a really like added value to the city. And she was able to say, you know, why I was selected for that leadership award and sort of what sets me apart from other volunteers in this type of cycling community. And the second person was someone who had known me, who had been like a work supervisor for a number of different projects, and had seen me grow in different positions and take on and initiate leadership or lead different aspects and go above and beyond what I was supposed to be doing in my paid role. And this was also someone who had known me for well over 3 years as well. So they really could see me grow as a student, as a leader, and as a researcher. And I asked them probably around the same time as my academic referees and just said, I'm applying for this. Here's my research proposal. Here's my leadership statement. You know, if you can, please put something together. I'll let you know as soon as possible. You know, this is the deadline. It might not be needed if I'm not selected, but they were both willing to write something even if I wasn't chosen to move forward. So they were happy to support that. And I gave them the link to the criteria of what Vanier was looking for. So.
Nancy, you're muted. Yeah.
Sorry, Sophie, can you share about your leadership referees?
So one of my leadership referees was the now former dean of McMaster's medical school, so the undergraduate medical dean, because a lot of the things that I was highlighting in my leadership statement were things that I had done, like community work and work at the provincial and the national level surrounding medical student government. And so he had seen me in that capacity, and he had seen all of the projects that I had led, so he could speak to that aspect of my leadership statement. And we also had like frequent meetings, so I got to know him over my time in medical school. And then my second leadership reference was another thing that I mentioned in my leadership statement was a lot of the work that I did in my cultural community. And so I've been doing that much longer than I ever decided I wanted to be a researcher. So the person that I asked was one of the community leaders to be my second referee. And so he could speak to me since he's known me since childhood. So he could speak to me as a child growing up and then taking on more leadership roles in my community as I got older, and kind of how I think I have evolved over time to become who I was. So those were my two leadership references. And I did want to make sure that the people that I chose to write references could speak specifically to the activities that I chose to highlight in my leadership statement.
Yeah, great. So it all fit together really nicely. There's a question. What if my current, so thanks, Brenny, you answer that, or what do you want to say?
I did, yeah. I just kind of was saying it's just so hard to decide, right? Elise and Sophie, it's not easy, and you kind of go back and forth. I mean, to have a conversation with your supervisor, sometimes you can get a sense, right? When you say, because you don't want to alienate your new supervisor. They're like, why didn't you ask me? Right. And sometimes just having a conversation and getting a sense for like, you know, I'm thinking about asking my MA because I know you don't know me that well. And sometimes they'll say, actually, I can put together this story, right? Really strong. If they're eminent in their field and they're used to writing letters, like don't underestimate that they can't put together a story about you and why you've come to the lab. But again, I think that's more conversation. I wouldn't have that conversation by email. I would have it through Zoom, right? To try to get a sense for that ebb and flow of their comfort level. And if, you know, if they're saying, well, you know, this would be hard, this might be hard, right? Then that's also giving you the cue that maybe you go to your MA. So I would start with my supervisor, have the conversation so that way nothing's a surprise, and say, I'm applying for the Vanier, but I think this is hard because, right? And that's what I'm thinking about for you, Zara.
I think what you're talking about, Brenda, too, is that I think it's important to start telling people you're going to do this. So in my role as the assistant dean in a graduate program, you know, the way it works in our program is we know who's going to apply. We want to work the hardest to support their application. You know, we want our, you know, I want all the students at McMaster to get these awards. It's good for them. It's good for faculty. It's good for our university. So it's not something you should do on your own secretly. Seek out, you know, reach out to your assistant dean and say this, let them know. And, you know, they can be very helpful and supportive, you know, let people know I'm applying for this. It's coming soon, you know, and would you, you know, maybe it's not your referee, but maybe there's a faculty member who taught you and you may want to reach out. Would you be someone who might review my writing, my letters, my this? Would you help me with this? It's, you know, a lot of effort, you know, on your part, you've got to lead this, but I think start getting some support now if you're serious about doing this, because they're one, maybe there was a question earlier about how many can come from a faculty. I know in FHS, we are limited, Faculty of Sciences, how many can go from each school or program to the competition. It might not be the same in all programs. So you want to make sure you have support to go forward for this, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah. I think, Nancy, there's one more slide.
Okay. Again, this is above and beyond. So your referee should be able to speak to how you're not just, you're all exceptional students, but not just the average student, what other things you've done, how you've taken on responsibility, what you've achieved. Provide some context to illuminate how all the other things you've done, you know, contribute to you being exceptional. Again, high achievement doesn't necessarily mean leadership. So the referees need to speak to more than just, you know, hey, you've got this average and this is what you've done. It should be more than that. Has the number of applications per program? Not that I know of, no. That's a question from Cindy.
Yeah.
And just some final tips. I think you should reach out within your program, perhaps ask if there have been successful award winners in your program. And, you know, in my role, I often will speak to our previous Vanier winner and say, would you be willing to share or speak to a student about a successful tips? That's always helpful. Discuss things with your supervisor and your chair. I think Elise said this, and probably Sophie too. It's a lot of writing, rewriting, editing, rejigging it, but I think that's okay to do. You know, I think it's a worthwhile process. And then afterwards, it does set you up for, I know for CHR, we talked about this, it sets you up for a CIHR doctoral application to get this going and helps you get together your thoughts about your thesis and proposal. So it is a worthwhile process to go through, but a tough one, but worthwhile. Brenda, do you have final tips and comments you want to share?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Hey.
But I think Elise and Sophie might have some final words of advice. Elise?
I I would say to start as early as you possibly can. If you're thinking about it and you're really motivated, work on it, because it can get overwhelming if you leave it to the week before or even a few weeks before. Try to spend as much time and break it off into manageable chunks. So maybe one day you'll be reflecting on what you've been working on and what your story is, and the next day you're working on your research proposal. And try to take all feedback in a positive way. It might not feel positive at the time, but people are just trying to help you get to the final round and move forward to the competition. So take any and all feedback in a constructive way and use it as you can, and don't be afraid to reach out to people. I every time I was like, I'm sorry, Dr. Pius, can you please review this again? And really do try to lean on your supervisor if you have that good relationship with them to provide support, and hopefully they'll provide you with all the resources that you need for the application.
I don't have much else to add, but I think that, especially for me, I struggled with the leadership statement because I don't necessarily think I'm the best about talking about myself, but I think that just in all writing, just getting down a draft and then focusing on editing it, I think the first hurdle is just having something down and then sending it out to as many people as possible and just going through all of the rigorous edits. I think I had like 10 iterations of just my leadership statement alone.
So question here, can I provide a journal email that asks me to review your paper as a leadership reference letter? No, you need someone to speak about your leadership in your leadership capacity in a big picture way. So that wouldn't be an appropriate leadership reference letter, no.
But yeah, I was just going to say, Nancy, but that's an example, right? That you've been invited to review a top journal. So then that can go in your CCV, right?
Yeah.
As an example, but that's not an example of a leadership letter. Yeah. Now, in your academic letter, somebody could comment, right? Because you've given them that tip, like Sophie and Elise did to their academic referees. I've been an invited reviewer to this journal, right? And that could be something that then that's up to the person, right? That's writing that letter if they decide to embed that in there. But that's an example of something that should be in your academic letter if you have that experience. So again, you can see how the pieces come together. It's in your CCV, it's showing up there, and I go, oh, wow, like they've been, they're already reviewing journal articles. That certainly speaks to potential.
Yep. There's a question. Is there a difference between what you submit to the department for first pass of screening to the later stages? Are different components of the application due at different times? I can only speak to about that first part of the question. Absolutely. So Tony and Diane and whoever's chairing this year have created a great process in the past where you do get feedback. If you get to the university level and you're going to go to the next stage, you do get feedback on how to improve your application. And it seems to always be Thanksgiving weekend that I'm working with students to review their applications for the second round to go from the university. So yes, both the faculty on the committees and other people will, and your supervisor. So it should be, your supervisor's got to be all in, or whoever it is. If you get to that point, we work very hard to help support to make it even better.
Yeah.
And as far as the stages, I'll let Diane talk about that.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say, yes, there's two distinct stages. So if you're submitting your first level, if you go to the Vanier Learn More page on our scholarships page, it has all of the documentation, all of the application lists, checklists, so you know exactly what's due at what stage. So different things are due. You don't leave, like reference letters aren't due until stage 2 if you're successful in moving forward, but that doesn't mean you don't start working on it right away because you need to allow them the time. But all of that information is documented. We have everything available for you on the websites. So be sure to read through all of that. It gives you all of the dates and deadlines for everything you need for stage 1 and stage 2 if you're moving forward.
There's a question about the standardized way people read applications. I think they're provided to, at the university level, they're provided in a certain order, but I tend to read the leadership and the research proposals first and then look at the CCVs. So it's all, again, those leadership statement is your opportunity to, to grab us. My undergrad is multidisciplinary. I'm applying for NSIC. Would it raise eyebrows if I have a humanities academic reference? I don't think so. If it's a strong reference, I don't think that's a problem.
Yeah, and my references came from 2 different departments. So the Master of Public Health program is in Health Sciences. So those students typically, well, they would be applying to CIHR. And then I had my supervisor from science. So I don't think that that's an issue.
And then there was a question about, do we have a standardized, as reviewers, do we have a standardized order of reading the application, or does it vary reviewer to reviewer? I can't, so I will say, like, when I receive an application, it's already put together, whatever that means, through the system. And I can see Diane nodding, because that happens all behind the scenes. Like when I submit a grant, everything gets sandwiched together. So I usually do read through it in the order that it comes to me. And I can't remember if academic comes first or leadership. I'm really sorry. But yeah, I scan through, and then I will say I go back, right? I'm cross-checking. I'm like scrolling around because I use PDFs. So I just am looking through the entire document to get a sense, but it is sort of, Diane and Tony might be able to tell you, is it academic first? I think the CCV is up front. But
I'd have to take a look at it again. We have the checklist. I know certainly for the stage 1, which is really nothing off of the Vanier portal where they're filling out their forms. I'm just opening the checklist right here, but we do ask that you use your checklist, you tick it off. Your checklist should be the very first thing that's in your letter of intent package. And it just makes it easier for our internal reviewers, especially, that everything is in the same order that's on our checklist. That way the reviewers knows that every application they look at is going to be in the same order. So I'm just waiting for it to pop open here, and I'm just gonna, from the internal perspective, I can tell you that, sorry, slow opening Word apparently.
And Rebecca had a question about whether what you submit the first pass is different than later stages. So yes, there are different components of the application that are due at different times. So that checklist will tell you what is needed for stage 1 and then what is needed for stage 2. So your leadership references are not due until later, if I recall correctly. So there's less due up front, and you'll have time to collect that as you move forward.
That's right. Thanks, Elise.
I'm just going to pop in, the reference letters are due at the ResearchNet deadline, which is, I don't even know right now. Diane, do you remember the ResearchNet deadline? They're not due at stage 1 or stage 2. The reference letters are due at the very end, the very last deadline, because we can't see them. So we can't we can't suggest any changes to them. So we give you to the end to submit.
Right.
Stage 1 has a few documents. And then after, if you make it through at stage 1, we give you suggestions, and we'll say, oh, you know what? This is what you can improve for these documents you submitted at stage 1. Then at stage 2, you resubmit your stage 1 documents and the rest of the application. So at stage 2, the whole application is due, other than the reference letters, which again are not, you don't create them, you don't see them anyway. So they get well, you do see the leadership ones, but we can't ask a reviewer to change a letter. So that's why we don't ask for them at stage 2.
Yeah. So on the checklist, the CV actually falls down towards the bottom. It's the research proposal and the personal leadership statement that kind of head up the package. But again, all of those documents, I had popped a link to our website for the Vanier Learn More page that's in the chat. So if you want, you can go there. Otherwise, you can just go to the grad studies website and follow scholarships through to government and then to Vanier, and everything you need is there. And I'll pop our email address in again, just in case there's people that had joined later on and didn't see it as well.
Diane, did you answer all the questions? Do we start from the beginning, or
I think we've been pretty on top of answering the questions. There's just one here about for transcripts. Are scanned copies of official transcripts by the students acceptable, or do we need to mail them in? No, just send us in scanned copies. Make sure they're very legible. Always keep your official ones handy though, just in case they ever ask you for them.
And you will need the scan. You will need to supply your graduate administrator scanned transcripts, because they will upload it to your application. But for stage 1, you can scan them and submit them to the department, but you need to send your department the same set so that they upload them for you to ResearchNet.
Lots
Okay.
of little things. There was one question about, and you know what, one thing I don't think when Zoom's recorded, whether you get to see the chat. I think you only get to see the recording of the slide. So good thing people have come today, because it would be I think it would be very different and hard sometimes to watch this if people can't see what we're talking about. But nonetheless, there was a question about, is there conflict of interest of asking profs as a referee at another university? And I haven't, like, even as somebody who's reviewed, I've never said, oh, like they have somebody else from another university, there might be a conflict. So people do often have as their academic referees or leadership referees from other universities. Not uncommon.
Yep. Brenda, I believe there is a way to save the chat. I will see if I can figure that out. And if I can, I have the attendance list, so I can certainly email out the chats as well to everybody, just so that they have them and there's something there to reference back to.
Okay, good. I think we had one more slide, Tony, which was our our big round of applause, really, and that's for Elise and Sophie. Because they're what make this presentation. They bring the Vanier to life, right? Real people get the Vanier, right, Sophie? Real people get the Vanier, right, Elise? So yeah, and so I just want to thank them and thank Diane, and of course thank Nancy as well, and thank all of you for attending. So I don't have anything else to say.
I've got one more question in here that somebody asked before we go. Thank you as well to Nancy and Brenda. There was one, where did it go? Sorry, it just popped in. How should they approach the nomination letter?
So that is letting your assistant dean or your program director know as soon as, well, I think you should do it as soon as possible. If you're serious about applying, send them an email. I'm applying for the Vanier Scholarship. I will need a nomination letter. I will get back to you soon and give you details about timelines, etc.
Yeah.
Reach out. Start telling people you're doing this. Give them lots of time to think. Put in their schedule to write those letters.
You shouldn't be surprised, right, Nancy? Like,
No.
you're not surprised as assistant dean when you have people saying I'm applying.
Yeah. And if you've been told in the past that sometimes you need help with your writing, which we all have, I've been told in the past I need help with my writing, take the opportunity to reach out to a faculty member, or maybe you have a colleague that's a really excellent writer, and talk about, I may need some editing, some wordsmithing. I mean, I remember, compelling writing is what engages the reviewers. I remember Elise and Sophie's applications from over a year ago. So because they're well written, they grabbed me. So
yeah, Elise, I love that sentence. She's interesting, and it's not like that. I don't think it's a judgment, right? Although I have some concerns still about that sentence, but nonetheless, I think they're more speaking to the writing, right? About how it wasn't the what, it's the how, and we can work on the how. It just can take many iterations. So we are going to break a McMaster record, right? Right, Diane, right, everybody? We're going to break a McMaster record. I think the highest is still in 2017. I think I'd have to go back there, right? Tony, I forget when you put that slide up.
I think we had 10. Was it 10?
Yeah, but the life was different back then. I also, I'm not blaming the past. But I think too, the other thing and I'll just emphasize one more point, is that the notion of equity, diversity, inclusion, it was at the forefront of our discussions at the national level. Indigenous applications go through a special process. There are people on our committee who have expertise, who have been designated to review those applications. So, so please, and I can tell you around the national table, and Diane or Nancy can tell you around everybody wants everybody to get the scholarship. It's really, it's really a thoughtful process. People are really, really think hard and advocate and do all these things, but they can only advocate based on what's in the portfolio. They don't know you. They don't know anything about you. But what happens is we start to feel like we do. And I'm saying the we because when I have an applicant, and there have been times where the person's on the cusp, but because of what's in there, I say, no, look at this. And that can push people into the successful category. I can't do that for McMaster though, because they don't let me.
Reach out to your directors or assistant deans, let them know it's a win-win for everyone. When you get when you are successful next year, it's great for your program, it's great for your supervisor, it's great for the school. So reach out soon, and because you may need some support, and they will provide support for you.
Yeah. So without further ado, because I hate Zoom awkward silences, so we are going to press that magical button all at the same time at the bottom, which says leave. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Elise and Sophie. Oh yeah, the big applause.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Louise. Bye, everybody.